The glass doors of Harbor Point Communications gleamed under the pale Spokane sunlight, but to Emily Nguyen they loomed like the gates of a prison. At 8:55 IMM on a crisp Tuesday in April, she stepped into the lobby, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Her heart thudded, not with the usual anticipation of a busy workday, but with a creeping dread she couldn't shake. The receptionist Jessica offered a tight smile, her eyes darting away too quickly. Something was wrong. Emily's fingers tightened around the strap of her leather purse as she rode the elevator to the 10th floor, her reflection in the mirrored walls pale and strained. She was 31 years old, 6 years deep into a career that had consumed her, and yet, in this moment, she felt like a child summoned to the principal's office. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open to reveal the open-plan office of Harbor Point Communications, a sleek modern space filled with the hum of phones and the clatter of keyboards. Emily's cubicle, tucked near the corner, was a shrine to her dedication, a thriving pothos plant curling over the edge, a framed photo of her parents at her college graduation, and a stack of meticulously organized client files. But she wasn't headed to her desk today. A note on her computer screen, written in Sarah Tran's sharp, unmistakable handwriting, read, "My office, 9 o'clock. I am urgent." Emily's stomach twisted. Sarah Tran, her boss, was not one for impromptu meetings. A former star account executive turned managing director, Sarah ruled Harbor Point with the precision of a surgeon and the warmth of a winter storm. Emily had spent years navigating Sarah's moods, learning to anticipate her demands, but this summons felt different. Ominous, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. She smoothed her navy blazer, took a deep breath, and walked towards Sarah's corner office, ignoring the curious glances from colleagues. The weight of their stares pressed against her, each one a silent question she couldn't answer. Sarah's office was a fortress of power, dominated by a massive mahogany desk that seemed to swallow the room. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Spokane skyline, but the view felt distant, inaccessible, like a promise Emily could never quite reach. Sarah sat behind the desk, her posture rigid, her jet-black hair pulled into a flawless chignon, her eyes cold and unyielding, locked on to Emily as she entered. A single sheet of paper, a printed email, lay in front of her, its edges crisp and accusing. "Sit," Sarah said, her voice like ice slicing through the air. Emily obeyed, clutching her purse in her lap to steady her trembling hands. The leather creaked under her grip, a small, grounding sound in the suffocating silence. She wanted to speak, to ask what was wrong, but the weight of Sarah's gaze pinned her in place. "I consider this disloyal," Sarah said, tapping the email with a perfectly manicured nail. Each tap was a hammer strike, echoing in Emily's chest. "After everything Harbor Point Communications has done for you?" Emily's breath caught. Her mind raced, scrambling to piece together the accusation. Disloyal? She had given Harbor Point everything. 6 years of her life, countless late nights, weekends sacrificed to perfect client pitches. She had tripled her client portfolio, brought in millions in revenue, earned the trust of every major account on their roster. Her work was the backbone of Harbor Point's success, and yet, here she was, facing Sarah's judgment like a traitor. "Sarah, Emily began, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Sarah cut her off, raising a hand. "Don't bother denying it. I have confirmation you interviewed with North Bay Solutions last Thursday. You took a half day for a dental appointment, I believe." The words dripped with sarcasm, each one a barb sinking into Emily's skin. The truth hit like a slap. Emily had interviewed with North Bay Solutions, Harbor Point's largest client, but she hadn't lied about the dental appointment. She'd scheduled it to cover the time, a small act of self-preservation in a company that demanded absolute loyalty while offering none in return. The interview wasn't about betrayal. It was about survival. For 3 years, Emily had come to this very office with meticulously prepared presentations, charts of her achievements, market rate salary comparisons, pleas for a raise that reflected her worth. 3 years of tough budget year excuses, even as Sarah announced record profits at quarterly meetings and drove to work in a gleaming new Lexus SUV. "I wasn't planning to leave without notice," Emily said, her voice low but firm. "I was exploring options. After 6 years, after everything I've done." "Everything you've done?" Sarah's laugh was sharp, cutting. "You think you're indispensable, Emily? You think Harbor Point owes you something because you did your job?" The words stung, not because they were true, but because they revealed how little Sarah valued her. Emily's hands tightened on her purse, her knuckles whitening. She wanted to scream, to list every sacrifice, every triumph, how she'd turned North Bay Solutions from a struggling account into a cornerstone of Harbor Point's revenue, how she'd stayed late to fix campaigns others had botched, how she'd smiled through every rejection, believing loyalty would eventually be rewarded. But the words caught in her throat, choked by a deeper pain, the realization that none of it mattered. Sarah slid Emily's company ID across the desk, the plastic card scraping against the wood like a final verdict. "Security will meet you at your desk," she said, her voice emotionless. "You can collect your personal belongings, but your building access is revoked immediately. I've already disabled your email." Emily stared at the ID, her name and photo staring back at her, a relic of a life she'd poured her heart into. The injustice burned in her chest, a molten rage mixed with something sharper. Betrayal. She wasn't just being fired, she was being erased. 6 years of dedication, reduced to a cardboard box and a security escort. She thought of her parents, who had immigrated from Vietnam and sacrificed everything to give her a chance at a better life. She thought of the nights she'd stayed up studying for her marketing degree at Washington State University, dreaming of a career where her work would matter. All of it dismissed in a single, cold moment. Emily stood, straightening her blazer with deliberate care. She wouldn't give Sarah the satisfaction of seeing her break. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. She extended her hand across the desk, a gesture that felt both defiant and absurd. "I wish you and Harbor Point continued success." Sarah hesitated, her eyes narrowing as if searching for a crack in Emily's composure. For a moment, confusion flickered across her face, but she shook Emily's hand briefly, her grip limp and dismissive. Emily turned and walked out, her head held high, even as her heart shattered with every step. The office was a blur as she made her way to her cubicle. Colleagues glanced up, their expressions a mix of shock and pity. Thomas, the IT specialist, mouthed, "Are you okay?" Emily forced a smile, nodding faintly. No drama, no scenes, just dignity. The security guard, a young man who looked barely out of college, hovered awkwardly nearby, his presence a humiliating reminder of her fall. Emily packed her belongings with mechanical precision. The pothos plant, its leaves trembling as she tucked it into a cardboard box. The photo of her parents, their proud smiles now a painful contrast to her reality. A small jade figurine her mother had given her for luck. 6 years of her life, reduced to a single box. As she packed, memories flooded her, moments that had defined her time at Harbor Point. She'd started here fresh out of graduate school, a 25-year-old with a marketing degree and a fire in her belly. She'd made coffee runs, organized meeting notes, and volunteered for the projects no one else wanted. She'd stayed late, poring over client briefs while the office grew dark and quiet. Within 2 years, she was handling mid-tier accounts. By year 4, she'd earned the trust of North Bay Solutions, Harbor Point's largest client, worth nearly 30% of their annual revenue. North Bay had been her proving ground. 3 years ago, their account was in crisis, mishandled by a senior colleague who'd dropped the ball. Emily had stepped in, working through the weekend to rebuild their campaign from scratch. Michael Lay, North Bay's CEO, had been impressed. "You're the only one who seems to understand what we need before we even ask," he'd told her. From that moment, he'd requested her as their account manager, and under her care, North Bay's contract had flourished, their marketing budget doubling. Sarah had praised her then, calling her work the kind of initiative we value. But that value never translated to her paycheck. Emily's first raise request had come after that success, armed with performance metrics and revenue numbers that spoke for themselves. "It's just not in the budget this year," Sarah had said, her face a mask of rehearsed regret. "But your contribution is noted." Emily had accepted it, trusting that her time would come. The next year, after bringing in 3 new major clients and winning an industry award for a campaign she'd designed, she tried again. "Next year will be better," Sarah promised. "We just need to tighten our belts a little longer." Meanwhile, Harbor Point leased an additional floor for expansion, and Sarah's new SUV gleamed in the executive parking lot. The third denial, 6 months ago, had broken something in Emily. She'd just negotiated a 40% increase in North Bay's contract value, a triumph that had colleagues clapping her on the back. "Your performance is exceptional," Sarah had said, her smile tight. "But we're investing in infrastructure this year. Perhaps we can revisit this in the summer." That night, Emily had sat alone in her apartment, staring at her laptop as she updated her resume for the first time in 6 years, not out of anger, but out of a quiet, resolute self-respect. She was worth more than empty promises and perpetual denial. Now, as she sealed the cardboard box, that decision felt like a lifeline. The security guard cleared his throat, gesturing toward the elevator. Emily lifted the box, its weight a tangible reminder of her loss, and walked out of Harbor Point for the first time as an outsider. The glass doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, and the April sunshine hit her face, warm and indifferent. She placed the box in her car trunk, her movements slow, deliberate. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at the screen. A message from Michael Lay, CEO of North Bay Solutions. "Can we move our final discussion to today? 2 p.m.? Emily's lips curved into a faint smile. Sarah thought she was punishing her, stripping away her career like a thief in the night. She couldn't have been more wrong. Back at her apartment, Emily set the box on her kitchen counter and stared at it, the reality of her unemployment sinking in like a slow poison. The morning's adrenaline had faded, leaving a hollow ache in its wake. She wasn't just between meetings or taking a day off, she was jobless. The word felt foreign, shameful, like a brand she didn't deserve. She sank onto a kitchen stool, her hands trembling as she pressed them against her face. The silence of her apartment was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside. Her phone rang, jolting her from her thoughts. It was Olivia, her best friend, her voice urgent. "Emily, I just heard. Thomas texted me. Are you okay?" Emily swallowed, forcing her voice to stay even. "I'm processing. It happened so fast." "It's completely unfair," Olivia said, her indignation crackling through the line. "Everyone knows you're the reason North Bay stayed with Harbor Point. Sarah's just intimidated because you're better than she ever was." There was truth in that. Sarah had been Harbor Point's golden child before moving into management, her name still whispered in reverent tones by older colleagues. But Emily had seen the way Sarah lingered in her North Bay meetings, interjecting with unnecessary comments, her smile tight as clients praised Emily's work. It wasn't just oversight, it was insecurity, a need to remind everyone she was still in control. "The worst part is how she did it," Emily said, a flash of anger breaking through her calm. "Like I'd committed treason for looking out for myself after 3 years of being denied what I earned." "It's her loss," Olivia said firmly, "and honestly, Em, maybe it's for the best. You've been undervalued there forever." Olivia was right, but the truth didn't dull the pain. Emily had stayed at Harbor Point out of loyalty, not to Sarah but to her clients, her colleagues, the work she loved. Getting fired like this, escorted out like a criminal, cut deeper than she'd expected. It wasn't just a job, it was her identity, her proof that she'd made it, that her parents' sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Her phone beeped with an incoming call. "Michael Lay." "Olivia, I need to take this. It's North Bay." "Go. Call me after," Olivia said, hanging up. Emily took a deep breath and answered. "Emily, I just heard what happened at Harbor Point, Michael said, his voice warm but direct. Are you available to come in today? I'd like to accelerate our conversation. Her heart raced. Yes, I can be there at 2 p.m. as you suggested. Excellent. And Emily? Don't worry about this morning. Sometimes these things work out for the best. After hanging up, Emily caught her reflection in the kitchen window. The woman staring back wasn't defeated. She was resilient, poised for something new. She showered, changed into her best suit, the one she wore for pitching new clients, and applied her makeup with care. As she did, a strange calm settled over her. Sarah's firing had been meant to break her, to punish her for daring to seek more, but in that moment, Emily realized it might have been the push she needed to claim her worth. The North Bay Solutions headquarters was a stark contrast to Harbor Point's dated office. Perched on the top 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Spokane, it buzzed with modernity. Open workspaces, collaborative pods, and walls of windows showcasing the Cascade Mountains. Emily rode the elevator to the 30th floor, her mind racing. She'd need to explain her sudden availability without sounding bitter, to strike a balance between honesty and professionalism. The stakes were high, but so was her determination. The elevator doors opened, and Michael Lay stood waiting, his salt and pepper hair and easy smile a welcome sight. Emily, thank you for coming on short notice, he said, shaking her hand warmly. I appreciate the flexibility, she replied, her voice steady. It's been an unexpected day. Let's talk in my office, Michael said, leading her through the bustling workspace. Employees she knew from her North Bay work waved, their smiles genuine. Michael's office was modest but inviting, with comfortable chairs arranged for conversation rather than intimidation. He offered her coffee, and she accepted, the warmth of the mug grounding her. Once settled, Michael got to the point. I received a call from Sarah Tran this morning, he said, his tone neutral. She informed me you'd no longer be handling the North Bay account, and that she'd personally oversee our business until a replacement was assigned. Emily nodded, keeping her expression calm despite the anger flaring inside. Of course Sarah would try to retain North Bay herself, stepping into the role Emily had built from the ground up. What she doesn't know, Michael continued, is that we were already concerned about our relationship with Harbor Point. He leaned forward, his eyes steady. The latest campaign results were excellent, because of you. But we've noticed issues elsewhere. Delayed responses, quality problems with anyone but you, a sense they're taking our business for granted. Emily's pulse quickened. This was more than a job offer. It was validation. I wasn't aware of those concerns, she said carefully. 3 months ago, our board suggested exploring other marketing partners, Michael said. I resisted because of you. Your understanding of our brand goes beyond the typical client-agency relationship. When you reached out about opportunities here, it felt like perfect timing. He slid a document across the desk. This isn't an interview, Emily. It's a job offer. Director of Client Strategy, you'd build and lead a team to manage all our external marketing partnerships. Emily glanced at the offer letter, her breath catching at the salary figure. Nearly double what she'd earned at Harbor Point, more than she'd dared hope for in her raise requests. This is very generous, she managed. It's market rate for someone with your experience and results, Michael corrected. Sometimes it takes leaving a situation to realize what you're truly worth. That evening, Emily sat at her kitchen table, the offer letter in front of her, signed and ready to return. She'd asked for the night to consider it, a professional courtesy, but her heart already knew the answer. Her phone buzzed with texts from Harbor Point colleagues, word of her firing spreading like wildfire. A message from Thomas stood out. Sarah called an emergency meeting after you left, said you were terminated for breach of loyalty. The irony's not lost on anyone. Emily shook her head. Sarah was trying to make an example of her, but it seemed her tactics were backfiring. Another text from Jessica. Sarah's been locked in her office making calls all day. Looks stressed. Guess she's worried about North Bay. Emily didn't respond. There was no satisfaction in Sarah's distress, only a quiet certainty that she'd made the right choice. As she stepped onto her balcony, the cool spring air brushing her skin, she felt lighter than she had in years. Sarah had thought she was punishing her, but she'd set her free. Whatever came next, Emily knew one thing. She would never again give her best to those who couldn't see her worth. The North Bay Solutions headquarters shimmered like a beacon of possibility against the Spokane skyline, its glass facade reflecting the late afternoon sun. Emily Nguyen stepped out of her car, her navy suit crisp despite the emotional whirlwind of the morning. Her cardboard box of belongings, 6 years of her life at Harbor Point Communications, sat in the trunk, a silent reminder of her abrupt firing. But as she crossed the plaza toward the towering building, her heart pounded with something new, hope laced with defiance. Sarah Tran, her former boss, had thought she could break her with a single cold dismissal. Emily was here to prove her wrong. Inside, the lobby was a symphony of modern elegance, marble floors, sleek furniture, and a digital display showcasing North Bay's latest tech innovations. Emily's reflection flickered in the glass doors, her posture straight, her eyes steady. She was no longer the humiliated employee escorted out by security. She was a professional reclaiming her future. The receptionist, a young woman with a warm smile, greeted her by name. "Mr. Lay is expecting you," she said, gesturing toward the elevators, 30th floor. The ride up was a moment of quiet, a chance to gather her thoughts. Emily's mind churned with the morning's events. Sarah's icy accusation of disloyalty, the printed email waved like a weapon, the security guard's awkward presence as she packed her desk. The injustice burned, but beneath it lay a deeper wound. The realization that her loyalty to Harbor Point had been a one-way street, 6 years of dedication, of pouring her soul into every campaign, every client relationship, had meant nothing to Sarah. The memory of her company ID sliding across that mahogany desk, a symbol of her erasure, stung like a fresh cut. Yet here she was, summoned by Michael Lay, CEO of North Bay Solutions, Harbor Point's largest client. His message, "Can we move our final discussion to today, 2 p.m., had been a lifeline, pulling her from the wreckage of Sarah's betrayal. Emily smoothed her blazer, her fingers lingering on the fabric. She'd chosen this suit deliberately, the one she wore for high-stakes pitches, a reminder of her strength. Whatever Michael had to say, she would face it with the same professionalism that had carried her through the morning's humiliation. The elevator doors opened and Michael stood waiting, his salt and pepper hair catching the light. His presence was steady, grounding, a stark contrast to Sarah's calculated coldness. "Emily, thank you for coming on such short notice," he said, his handshake firm and warm. His eyes held a trace of concern, but also respect, a look Emily hadn't seen from Sarah in years. "I appreciate the flexibility," Emily replied, her voice calm despite the storm inside her. "It's been an unexpected day." Michael's smile was wry. "I can imagine. Let's talk in my office." He led her through North Bay's bustling workspace, a vibrant contrast to Harbor Point's dated beige walls. Open-plan desks buzzed with collaboration, and walls of windows framed the Cascade Mountains, their peaks dusted with spring snow. Employees she knew from her North Bay account waved, their smiles genuine. Unaware of the morning's upheaval, Emily nodded back, her heart lifting slightly. These were people who valued her work, who saw her worth. Michael's office was modest but welcoming, with a small sofa and armchairs arranged for conversation, not intimidation. A coffee maker sat on a side table, its aroma mingling with the faint scent of leather and polished wood. "Coffee?" he offered, pouring a mug before she could answer. Emily accepted it, the warmth seeping into her hands, grounding her. Once seated, Michael didn't waste time. "I received a call from Sarah Tran this morning," he said, his tone measured. "She informed me you're no longer handling the North Bay account, and that she'll personally oversee our business until a replacement is assigned." Emily's grip tightened on the mug, but she kept her expression neutral. Of course Sarah would insert herself into North Bay's account. claiming the role Emily had built from a crisis into a cornerstone of Harbor Point's revenue. The audacity was almost laughable, if it didn't hurt so much. "I see," she said, her voice steady. Michael leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "What she doesn't know is that we were already concerned about our relationship with Harbor Point. The latest campaign results were exceptional, because of you. But we've noticed issues elsewhere, delayed responses, inconsistent quality from anyone but you, a sense they're taking our business for granted." Emily's pulse quickened. This was more than a courtesy call, it was a reckoning. "I wasn't aware of those concerns," she said, though a part of her wasn't surprised. She'd often covered for Harbor Point's shortcomings, staying late to fix errors, smoothing over client frustrations. It had been her job, her duty, but it had also masked the company's flaws. 3 months ago, our board suggested exploring other marketing partners, Michael continued. "I resisted because of you. Your understanding of our brand, our needs. It's rare, Emily. When you reached out about opportunities here, it felt like fate." He opened a folder and slid a document across the desk. "This isn't an interview, it's a job offer. Director of Client Strategy. You'd build and lead a team to manage all our external marketing partnerships and agency relationships." Emily's breath caught as she scanned the offer letter. The title was impressive, but the salary figure stopped her cold. Nearly double what she'd earned at Harbor Point, more than she'd dared request in her last futile raise attempt. The number wasn't just generous, it was a validation of her worth, a stark contrast to Sarah's dismissals. "This is significant," she said, her voice catching slightly. "It's market rate for someone with your experience and proven results," Michael said, his tone matter of fact. "Sometimes it takes leaving a situation to realize what you're truly worth." The words hit like a revelation, echoing the quiet resolve that had been growing inside her. Emily nodded, her mind racing. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to redefine her future, to step into a role where her contributions would be recognized, not exploited. "I'd like the night to review it," she said, a professional reflex, though her heart already leaned toward yes. "Of course," Michael said, standing. "Take your time, and Emily, whatever happened this morning, it's Harbor Point's loss. I'm glad you're here." As she left his office, the offer letter tucked into her purse, Emily felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. The pain of Sarah's betrayal still lingered, but it was tempered by the knowledge that she was no longer bound to a company that saw her as expendable. She stepped into the elevator, her reflection in the mirrored walls no longer pale and strained, but resolute. Back at her apartment, Emily placed the offer letter on her kitchen table, its crisp edges a stark contrast to the cardboard box still sitting on the counter. The box held her Harbor Point life. Her pothos plant, her parents' photo, the jade figurine, and its presence felt like a wound that hadn't yet scabbed over. She poured a glass of wine and stepped onto her balcony, the Spokane skyline twinkling as dusk settled. The cool air brushed her skin, and for a moment, she let herself feel the weight of the day. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from Harbor Point colleagues piling up. Thomas, the IT specialist, had written, "Sarah called an emergency meeting after you left, said you were terminated for breach of loyalty. Nobody's buying it." Jessica, the receptionist, added, "Sarah's been in her office all day, making calls. She looks panicked. Guess North Bay's on her mind?" Emily didn't reply. The news should have felt satisfying, a small justice for Sarah's cruelty, but it only deepened her sense of betrayal. Sarah had tried to make an example of her, painting her as a traitor to scare others into submission. But the irony was clear. Sarah's obsession with loyalty was a facade, a way to mask her own insecurities. Emily sipped her wine, her thoughts drifting to the moments that had led her here, to the breaking point that had changed everything. 6 months ago, she'd walked into Sarah's office with her third raise request, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. She'd spent weeks preparing, compiling data that was impossible to ignore, a 40% increase in North Bay's contract value, 3 new major clients, an industry award for a campaign she'd designed. Her presentation was flawless, her tone professional but firm. "I've consistently exceeded expectations," she'd said, sliding her proposal across the desk. "This adjustment reflects my contributions and aligns with market rates." Sarah had barely glanced at the numbers. "Your performance is exceptional, Emily," she'd said, her smile tight, rehearsed. "But we're investing in infrastructure this year. Perhaps we can revisit this in the summer." The words had landed like a physical blow. Emily had stood there, her carefully crafted proposal ignored, her worth dismissed with a single sentence. She'd nodded, thanked Sarah, and left the office, but inside, something had fractured. That night, alone in her apartment, she'd opened her laptop and updated her resume, not out of anger or revenge, but out of a quiet, unshakable need to honor herself. She was worth more than empty promises, more than a company that demanded her loyalty while offering none in return. That decision had led to her interview with North Bay, a cautious step toward a future she hadn't fully dared to imagine. She'd been discreet, scheduling it during a half-day for a dental appointment, not because she was deceitful, but because she knew Sarah would see any move as betrayal, and she had. The printed email in Sarah's hand that morning was proof of her vigilance, her need to control. But it was also proof of something else, Sarah's fear. Emily had noticed it before, in the way Sarah inserted herself into her North Bay meetings. As a former Star account executive, Sarah had once been the darling of Harbor Point, her name synonymous with success. But management had changed her, or perhaps revealed her, a woman who craved the spotlight, who couldn't bear to be outshone. Emily's success with North Bay, her ability to anticipate their needs and deliver results, had made her a threat. Sarah's interruptions in those meetings, her unnecessary comments, her forced laughter, weren't oversight. They were insecurity. A desperate bid to remind everyone she was still the star. The memory brought a bitter taste to Emily's mouth. She'd never challenged Sarah, never sought to undermine her. She'd done her job, poured her heart into it, believing that excellence would be enough. But excellence had made her a target, and loyalty had made her vulnerable. She set her wineglass down, her resolve hardening. Sarah's firing hadn't broken her. It had freed her. The next morning, Emily woke to a voicemail from an unknown number. She played it as she brewed coffee, her heart sinking as the voice introduced itself. "Lynn Pham, a board member at Harbor Point Communications. Miss Nguyen, I understand there was an incident regarding your employment yesterday," Lynn said, her tone polished but urgent. "I'd like to meet with you today to discuss it. Sarah may have been hasty in her decision." Emily froze, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. So that was it. Sarah had acted without board approval, and now Harbor Point was scrambling to contain the fallout. North Bay's account, worth 30% of their revenue, was at risk, and Emily's firing had put it in jeopardy. The realization should have felt triumphant, but it only deepened her sense of injustice. 3 years of denied raises, 3 years of being undervalued, and now, suddenly, the board cared. She called Lynn back, keeping her voice professional. "I appreciate the call, Ms. Pham, but I've already accepted another position." A pause. "May I ask where?" Lynn's tone was cautious, probing. "I don't think that's appropriate to share at this time," Emily replied, her boundaries firm. Another pause, longer this time. "If this is about compensation, I'm sure we can revisit those conversations," Lynn said. "The board values your contribution to Harbor Point." The irony was almost painful. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "It's not just about compensation," she said. "It's about respect and recognizing employee worth before they have one foot out the door." Lynn pressed for a meeting, and Emily agreed, but with a caveat. "I can meet at 9 a.m., but to be clear, I've signed an employment contract elsewhere. I'm not coming to negotiate a return." "Understood," Lynn said, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced. "I'll see you tomorrow." Emily hung up, her heart racing. The meeting wasn't about returning to Harbor Point. She had no intention of going back. It was about closure. A chance to articulate what had gone wrong, not just for herself, but for the colleagues she'd left behind. She thought of Jessica's kind words, Thomas, quiet support, the others who'd texted her with shock and sympathy. Harbor Point's culture of blind loyalty had failed them all, and Emily wouldn't walk away without saying so. The Harbor Point reception area felt alien as Emily signed in as a visitor. Jessica's eyes widened when she saw her, her professional smile faltering. "Emily, you're here for Miss Pham?" she asked, her voice low. "That's right," Emily confirmed, her pen steady on the visitor log. The act felt surreal, a reminder of how quickly her world had shifted. "I'll let her know you've arrived," Jessica said, then leaned closer. "For what it's worth, everyone's saying this was wrong. You were the best of us." The words warmed Emily, a small balm for the wound of her dismissal. "Thank you, Jessica," she said, her smile genuine. She rode the elevator to the conference room, centering herself. She'd chosen a navy suit, not to impress, but to remind herself she was an equal, not a disgraced employee begging for redemption. Lynn Pham was waiting, a woman in her 60s with silver hair cut in a precise bob, her presence commanding yet composed. A slim folder sat in front of her, its contents a mystery. "Miss Nguyen, thank you for coming," Lynn said, standing to shake her hand. "Please, sit." Emily noted Sarah's absence with relief. This would be a private conversation, free of her former boss's venom. She sat, her posture straight, her expression calm. Lynn opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents. Emily's personnel file, performance reviews, raise requests. "I've reviewed your record," Lynn began. 6 years of excellent performance, consistent growth in your portfolio, and 3 formal requests for salary adjustment, all denied. Emily nodded, unsurprised but attentive. "I assumed those decisions were reviewed at the board level," she said, testing the waters. "Major compensation changes, yes," Lynn said, her tone clipped. "But management has discretion within certain parameters. Sarah has been operating with significant autonomy." The admission hung in the air, a crack in Harbor Point's facade. Lynn closed the folder, her eyes meeting Emily's. "There's no documentation justifying your termination. No company policy prohibits interviewing elsewhere." The word used was disloyal. Emily's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice measured. "An interesting choice, given the circumstances." Lynn's eyebrow arched slightly. "Indeed. The board would like to offer you reinstatement with the salary adjustment you requested in your last review, plus a 10% increase and the title of Senior Account Director." The offer was better than anything Sarah had ever considered, but it came too late. 3 years, and 1 humiliating dismissal too late. Emily took a moment, choosing her words carefully. "That's a generous offer," she said. "But as I mentioned, I've accepted a position at North Bay Solutions. My new role begins Monday." Lynn's eyes narrowed slightly, as if gauging her resolve. "Sarah is concerned North Bay may reconsider their relationship with Harbor Point, given your departure." "That's a question for North Bay," Emily said, her tone neutral but firm. She wouldn't be drawn into speculation or leverage her new role to punish Harbor Point. Her integrity was worth more than revenge. Lynn studied her, then nodded. "One last question. What could Harbor Point have done differently to retain you?" The question was unexpected, but it gave Emily the opening she'd hoped for. She leaned forward, her voice steady but infused with quiet conviction. "Recognize my value before I had to look elsewhere to find it. Loyalty works both ways, Miss Pham." Harbor Point expected unwavering commitment, while repeatedly showing I wasn't worth investing in. That's not sustainable. Lynn's expression softened, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "A fair assessment," she said, standing to shake Emily's hand. "Thank you for your candor. Whatever your next steps, I wish you success." Emily walked out of Harbor Point for the second time, her heart lighter. This meeting hadn't been about reinstatement. It had been about reclaiming her narrative, leaving on her terms with her dignity intact. As she stepped into the April sunshine, she felt a weight lift, a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Monday morning dawned with a mix of excitement and nerves. Emily arrived at North Bay Solutions early, her new office a stark contrast to her cramped Harbor Point cubicle. A real office with a door and windows, a welcome basket on the desk, and a technology setup ready to go. Michael stopped by at 9 a.m., introducing her to her team, 5 talented marketing specialists who would report to her, managing North Bay's agency relationships. "Team, this is Emily Nayan, our new Director of Client Strategy," he announced. "Many of you know her from her exceptional work at Harbor Point. We're fortunate to have her expertise in-house." The team's warm welcome eased her nerves, but the real test came later, when Michael invited her to a conference room where North Bay's executive team waited. "Before you dive in," he said, "we need your input on a decision. In light of recent changes, we're reevaluating our relationship with Harbor Point. Their contract is up next month." The chief marketing officer nodded. "You understand our needs and Harbor Point's capabilities. We value your perspective." Emily's heart raced. Here was her chance for revenge. A single recommendation could end Harbor Point's contract, a blow Sarah would feel for years. No one would question it. Business relationships shifted all the time. But as tempting as it was, revenge wasn't her path. She took a breath, her voice steady. "I think we should evaluate Harbor Point on the same criteria as any other partner. Their work has been strong, but consistency and account management will be critical moving forward." The executives nodded, and the meeting moved on, but Emily felt a quiet pride. She'd chosen integrity over spite, and it felt right. A week later, at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, an email went out from North Bay's leadership, a decision finalized after reviewing proposals from 3 agencies. Michael had shared it with Emily first, a courtesy given her history. The message was direct. "After careful consideration, North Bay Solutions has decided to transition our account to Meridian Creative, effective immediately. Emily knew our new Director of Client Strategy will oversee the transition." Emily imagined Sarah's reaction. Shock, then panic as the reality sank in. North Bay's loss, 30% of Harbor Point's revenue, was a catastrophic blow, and Emily would manage the transition, a twist of fate Sarah couldn't have foreseen. She hadn't orchestrated it. Harbor Point's own shortcomings, exposed by her departure, had sealed their fate. That afternoon, a LinkedIn request arrived from Jessica, followed by a message. "Office is chaos. Sarah's in emergency meetings. 3 account managers updated their resumes. Karma's fast." Emily smiled faintly, accepting the request with a reply. "Thank you for your kindness at Harbor Point. Wishing you the best." Taking the high road wasn't just satisfying, it was empowering. Emily threw herself into her new role, building her team, streamlining processes, and embracing challenges she'd never faced at Harbor Point. Success, she realized, was the best revenge, not a calculated strike, but the natural outcome of valuing herself when others didn't. A year later, Emily stood on her balcony, the Spokane skyline glittering under a spring sky. Her role at North Bay had exceeded her expectations, her team thriving, her contributions shaping the company's future. Looking back, she saw Sarah's firing not as a punishment, but as a gift. The push she needed to find her true worth. In seeking justice, she'd found something greater, self-respect, and the courage to claim the success she deserved.